What is the oldest version of the Bible or the stories in the Bible? Is it the Dead Sea Scrolls or are there older versions?
The Dead Sea Scrolls are the oldest of the Old Testament. So when they were discovered, they were discovered in 1946 to 1957. And at that point, during their discovery, they pushed back a lot of our previous oldest manuscripts 1,000 years, which was a big deal.
Imagine a place so mysterious, so cursed by nature itself, that ancient prophets, kings, and even modern scientists whispered the same chilling words. This is where God punished mankind, a sea where nothing lives, a landscape that looks like another planet. And for centuries, it held secrets buried beneath its lifeless waters. But what if I told you that the Dead Sea, the very place once thought to hide the ashes of Sodom and Gomorrah, has just given up one of its most shocking secrets? A discovery so unsettling that it could rewrite not only ancient history, but also how we understand the future of humanity. Stay with me, because this story has everything: lost cities, biblical curses, hidden scrolls, unexplained sinkholes, and a revelation scientists never expected. The Dead Sea is unlike any other place on Earth.
The Dead Sea is unique in many aspects. Its chemistry, its evolution, its composition.
Straddling the borders of Israel, the West Bank, and Jordan, it sits at the planet's lowest exposed elevation, roughly 1,400 feet below sea level. Its waters are monstrously salty, so dense that no fish can survive, no seaweed can cling, no reeds can take root. From a distance, it looks dead, but human memory clings to it like salt to skin. For millennia, Jewish, Christian, and Islamic traditions have pointed to this region as the scene of divine punishment. The stories of Sodom and Gomorrah are tattooed into scriptures, oral histories, and local folklore. Explorers and archaeologists walked these shores for centuries, searching for evidence, often finding little more than sand and speculation. Then, in recent years, the Earth itself began to speak. Beginning around 2018, sinkholes started to appear along the retreating shoreline. At first, they were small, an unexpected hole in a farmhouse yard or under a dirt road. Then, they became dramatic, perfect circular chasms swallowing whole groves, roads, and sections of shoreline towns. Locals whispered of curses and ancient punishments returning. Scientists warned of aquifer collapse and disappearing freshwater-feeding subterranean voids. Inside several of these sinkholes, researchers found disturbing artifacts: stone blocks shaped by human hands, charred remains of what looked like wooden posts, and chemical traces consistent with sulfur burning. In some walls, the sediment appeared vitrified, glassy veins running through crushed earth as if extreme heat had passed through. Was the earth regurgitating fragments of a civilization? Could these be the torn edges of an ancient urban fabric destroyed by a single cataclysmic event? The biblical account is vivid and terrifying. It speaks of brimstone and fire, of smoke rising as the smoke of a furnace. For generations, scholars and skeptics considered these passages symbolic, moral narratives cloaked in poetic justice. But physical evidence began to demand the kind of attention myth rarely receives. In 2021, archaeologists at Tal el-Hammam, a site northeast of the Dead Sea, published findings that stunned both specialists and the public.
That if Tal el-Hammam is biblical Sodom,
Snapped, collapsed walls lay across streets. Pottery and mud brick were found fused together, sometimes melted into glass. Human remains were discovered in chaotic assemblages, bones shattered, skeletons contorted as though a violent force had thrown them aside. Radiocarbon dates concentrated around a mid-Bronze Age horizon, roughly 16.5 centuries before the Common Era, forming a tight destruction pulse within the archaeological sequence. The pattern matched what one would expect from an airburst, a meteor or asteroid exploding in the atmosphere, releasing energy and heat across a broad area. The blast would have demolished structures, ignited combustibles, and left a sterilized, scarred landscape behind. For those who lived through it, the world would have been unrecognizable within moments. When archaeologists compared their data to textual accounts, the parallels were hard to dismiss. Descriptions that once read like allegory now read like trauma recorded in sacred memory. To understand how severe an airburst can be, consider Tunguska in 1908, a blast that flattened forests over 600 square miles in Siberia, or Chelyabinsk in 2013, a relatively small meteor whose passing shattered windows and injured many by flying glass. But those pale beside the energies implied by Tal el-Hammam, vitrified sediment, glassified pottery, and evidence of sustained thermal alteration reaching temperatures higher than typical volcanic eruptions. Laboratory analysis found minerals altered in ways consistent with extreme, short-duration heating. Grains of silica were transformed into glassy spherules. Organic materials displayed charring consistent with instantaneous ignition. Some materials resembled trinitite, the glassy product left by nuclear detonations, though here the heat was natural rather than man-made. Ancient eyewitnesses would not have separated cause and meaning. A fire raining from the sky is not a meteor to a Bronze Age mind. It is wrath, an omen, an act of a deity. The blast's memory would be transmitted as moral and religious instruction, a warning encoded into story and worship, a scar in the cultural landscape. The Dead Sea Scrolls, discovered mid-20th century in Qumran caves, complicated the picture further.
7 decades since the Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered, around 80 new fragments of the ancient texts.
Thousands of fragments, hymns, and legal texts spoke not only of religion and law, but of apocalyptic expectation. Hidden among the fragments were references to a city of the plain consumed by a blaze from the sky and admonitions to heed cycles and signs. At first, scholars read them as theological rhetoric, but re-examination in light of archaeological data suggested something else. Particular scroll fragments appear to preserve localized memory, descriptive details that resonate with the physical record. Some scrolls contain calendrical and astronomical notations, encoded in language only partially understood. A few fragments include numerological sequences and phrases pairing catastrophic events with celestial markers, as though an observant community sought to lock knowledge into ritual. If the Essenes or other groups recorded such a calamity, they may have preserved the memory across generations through theological framing, while retaining observational data beneath the veneer of prophecy. Across ancient Near Eastern cultures, catastrophic events were routinely linked to celestial phenomena. Babylonian star catalogs warned of omens, Assyrian scribes correlated eclipses with kings' fortunes, and the Hebrew Bible sporadically equates cosmic signs with divine action. The Dead Sea fits into this matrix in intriguing ways. Modern astronomers know Earth periodically intersects debris fields and cometary streams. Many are harmless. Others carry dangerously large fragments. The probability of rare but devastating impacts is small, yet non-zero. If Bronze Age observers correlated certain cometary returns or meteor showers with calamity, they may have encoded cautionary tales into religious rites and stories to ensure communal survival. Those stories became scripture, their context moralized and preserved. What was once observational astronomy might become theological memory. The terrifying implication: if these were not one-off events but part of a longer cycle, humanity may still be on a clock written in stone and ink. Sediment cores drilled from the Dead Sea floor reveal alternations of salt, clay, and ash layers, a vertical archive of environmental upheavals.
In the cave near the Dead Sea in En-Gedi National Park, it's written in Aramaic, using the square Hebrew script.
At a depth corresponding to the mid-Bronze Age collapse, researchers found anomalous signatures, condensed charcoal, elevated sulfur, abrupt shifts in microfaunal evidence, and isotopic markers that imply sudden heating and desiccation. The lake level fell dramatically, then rose in erratic pulses, leaving behind a disturbed stratigraphic sequence. Centuries later, the modern Dead Sea is shrinking because of river diversion and mineral extraction. The shoreline retreats by roughly a meter or more each year in some places, exposing older sediments and subterranean cavities. New sinkholes appear almost monthly in certain regions, swallowing agricultural land and infrastructure. Those sinkholes periodically reveal artifacts and geologic textures that echo the ancient layers: burned sediment, stone blocks, and apparently fused materials. The coincidence troubles geologists. Are these modern changes simply exposing a long-buried, localized catastrophe? Or are human activities creating conditions that reactivate deeper geologic processes? Both possibilities suggest the Dead Sea is an active archive and a living hazard. Local voices give a different cadence to the scientific narrative. Bedouin elders who have tended flocks along the salt flats for generations recall nights when the sky burned and a terrible wind tasted of iron. An elderly fisherman told researchers how, as a child, a strange heat wave arrived without thunder or storm, cracking the mud and killing small fish in isolated pools. These are not formal observations, but when you place oral memory alongside vitrified sediment and fused pottery, patterns emerge that deserve examination rather than dismissal. At Tal El Hammam, the excavation reports read like a forensic autopsy. Archaeologists described collapsed roofs and streets strewn with polished ceramic fragments and glass beads formed in situ. In several loci, the mud brick walls were fused, their surfaces glazed by intense heat. Specialists recovered microspherules, tiny glass beads created when molten droplets condensed mid-air, organic residues charred at astonishing temperatures, and a tightly clustered radiocarbon horizon suggests a rapid, catastrophic event rather than a protracted decline. For field teams, the site presented the rawness of human tragedy, household implements preserved only to reveal the abruptness of their owner's end. The debate is alive, and that is a sign of healthy science, not conspiracy. Human remains recovered in sinkholes add a painful human face to the data. Skeletons with thermal alteration, charred bone surfaces, and fragmented contexts make interpretation difficult, but also poignant. In several discovery reports, small fragments of inscriptions, short phrases scratched into pottery or stone, were found near burial contexts. Translations remain partial, but some phrases line up uncannily with biblical imagery. Fire from the heavens, the plain consumed, and the sound as of a furnace. The presence of ephemeral domestic items, beads, spindle whorls, and a child's toy anchors catastrophe to everyday life in a way that radiocarbon dates and mineralogy cannot. Portions of the scroll corpus include calendrical notes and celestial observations wrapped in theological language. One fragment appears to juxtapose an ominous star or comet with a moral imperative. When the sky gives its sign, the plane will learn. Scholars debate whether this is observational astronomy cloaked in scriptural metaphor or symbolic prophecy that co-opts natural events for moral teaching. Either reading suggests a community attentive to sky and season, a people remembering not only theology, but events. Beneath the water, the environment becomes stranger still. The Dead Sea's hypersalinity creates a chemistry hostile to ordinary life, but hospitable to certain extremophile microbes.
The Dead Sea has been in decline for decades. What was once a thriving natural attraction,
Remote submersibles, built with corrosion-resistant components and designed for short missions, have returned images of microbial mats and chemical gradients clinging to brine-saturated sediments. These microbes metabolize sulfur and methane, recording in their community structures chemical anomalies tied to past heating events. In short, life exists here by chemical cunning rather than sunlight, and that life itself becomes an archive of environmental change. Sonar mapping of the basin, run by mixed international teams using advanced processing and magnetometry, shows anomalies that demand attention. Concentric rings, linear alignments, and rectangular anomalies cluster near reconstructed ancient shorelines. Detractors point to evaporate tectonics and salt flow as plausible natural generators of pattern. Proponents counter that some anomalies align with archaeological loci exposed by sinkholes and shoreline reconstructions, strengthening the argument for human activity rather than random geology. That embargoing, in part a protective measure against looting and misinterpretation, feeds suspicion in public foray. When archaeological data touch on sacred narratives and modern identity, governments declare prudence or silence. Official reasons range from national heritage protection to methodological caution. Critics, however, read this as obfuscation, especially when findings intersect with deeply held communal stories. The tension between scientific transparency and cultural sensitivity is acute in this region and colors how discoveries are perceived outside professional circles. The Dead Sea story is not a tidy argument, but a palimpsest of human memory, physical evidence, and natural processes. Small domestic artifacts and the charred imprint of a loom speak to ordinary life interrupted. A fragmentary line of text, "We saw the furnace open sky," reads like humanity's last claim to testimony. If the archaeological, geological, and textual threads converge, they suggest a past event recorded both in stone and scripture, a catastrophe so absolute that it was transformed into moral memory and ritual. Exploring the Dead Sea is not easy. Its waters corrode equipment, destroy diving suits, and suffocate any living thing that tries to enter. Yet in 2011, an Israeli research team attempted what few had dared, sending remotely operated submersibles into its depths. What they found shocked them. At the bottom of this so-called lifeless sea were entire clusters of microbial colonies, strange organisms thriving against all odds. Instead of feeding on sunlight, they consumed sulfur and methane. They lived, in other words, on fire itself. But microbes weren't the strangest discovery. Sonar mapping revealed unusual geometric patterns beneath the seabed. Circular mounds, perfect rectangles, and massive rock-like structures aligned with unnatural precision. Were these natural salt formations, or the submerged ruins of a lost civilization? Governments quickly moved to control the data. Detailed scans remained classified, and the few that leaked into scientific conferences were carefully worded. Anomalous structures, inconclusive geometry, further study needed, but conspiracy theorists, and even some scientists, whispered what officials refused to say. This could be the final resting place of Sodom and Gomorrah. Why keep such information secret? Publicly, officials claim it is for heritage preservation and national security. But many suspect a deeper reason: the explosive implications such a discovery would carry. Imagine proving, beyond a doubt, that one of the most dramatic biblical stories actually happened, that ancient scripture was not just metaphor, but eyewitness history. Such proof could destabilize faiths, rewrite religious authority, and ignite political battles across the Middle East. Archaeologists working in the region report subtle pressure. Some are warned not to speculate publicly. Others find funding suddenly drying up when their work nears controversial conclusions. Even academic journals, usually eager for sensational discoveries, tread cautiously. Secrecy breeds suspicion, and in this case, it adds fuel to the idea that what lies beneath the Dead Sea is so shocking it cannot yet be revealed. Of course, no story about the Dead Sea is complete without the haunting tale of Lot's wife. In the book of Genesis, when Lot and his family fled the doomed cities, they were warned not to look back. But Lot's wife disobeyed and was turned into a pillar of salt. Most dismiss this as myth, symbolism for disobedience and longing for a sinful past. Yet near Mount Sodom, a massive salt mountain towering above the Dead Sea, explorers discovered a natural column shaped eerily like a human figure. Locals call it Lot's wife. Coincidence? Maybe. But chemical testing revealed something odd. Some of these salt pillars show traces of intense burning, as though exposed to sudden, extreme heat. Not the slow erosion of centuries, but the searing touch of fire. Could Lot's wife have been a metaphor for a real phenomenon? Perhaps she wasn't literally transformed into salt, but rather enveloped by burning debris, crystallized by heat and salt spray from the boiling sea. A myth born from a horrifying reality. Then came one of the most baffling discoveries of all. In 2017, scholars piecing together fragments of an undeciphered Dead Sea Scroll found references to a mysterious text called the Book of Mysteries. This lost work supposedly recorded secret knowledge preserved by the Sons of Light, a sect obsessed with apocalyptic cycles. Among the fragmented lines was a chilling description. The heavens split. Fire rained without warning. The plain was consumed. The people became dust on the wind. It read less like prophecy and more like a survivor's memory. Even stranger, the scroll hinted at the destruction happening not once, but in cycles. It spoke of a time appointed when judgment would return again. For decades, scholars treated this as allegory, but when compared with Tal el-Hammam's evidence of cosmic airburst, the fragments seem less symbolic and more like coded history. A disaster so traumatic it was encrypted into scripture, waiting for a future generation to decipher. Fast forward to today. The Dead Sea is shrinking faster than ever.
The Dead Sea is now a shadow of its former self. Its famous buoyant waters are vanishing.
Human intervention, including diverting the Jordan River, industrial mining, and reckless water management, has accelerated its decline. Each year, its shoreline retreats, leaving sinkholes in its wake. But what if this isn't just environmental collapse? What if it's a warning? Geologists point out that the sinkholes resemble scars left by ancient seismic events. Some fear that the same geological stressors that triggered the Bronze Age catastrophe could be returning. Others warn of methane pockets forming beneath the surface, which, if ignited, could cause local explosions. Satellite imagery shows disturbing changes too. Areas of the seabed are shifting, depressions forming in patterns eerily similar to those seen in ancient crater sites. Are we witnessing the early signs of another disaster, one that could strike within our lifetimes? It's easy to get lost in data, charts, and theories, but step back for a moment and imagine the human story. Picture a bustling Bronze Age city near the Dead Sea, families selling goods in a market, children playing in courtyards, farmers hauling dates and figs from orchards, life thriving. Then, without warning, the sky ignites. A flash brighter than the sun. A wall of fire races across the horizon. The heat melts stone, wood, flesh. In seconds, homes become rubble, streets become furnaces, and people vanish like shadows in flame. The survivors, if any, stumble away in shock, their minds burned with trauma. Generations later, their descendants pass down the story, wrapping it in the only language they understand, divine wrath. And so myth becomes memory, memory becomes scripture, scripture becomes history. One of the most chilling theories about the Dead Sea conspiracy is that the region still hides the impact scar of the ancient catastrophe. Seismic studies hint at a buried crater deep beneath salt and sediment. Some data suggest an enormous depression, its dimensions consistent with a meteor impact or explosion. Others see it as simple tectonic movement. But if it is truly an impact site, it could be one of the most significant archaeological and geological discoveries in history. Proof that a cosmic event destroyed a civilization. Proof that scripture preserved eyewitness testimony. Proof that humanity's oldest warnings are not moral allegories but survival manuals. And here's the terrifying part. Some scientists whisper that radiation signatures from the crater suggest lingering anomalies, faint echoes of the unimaginable energies released thousands of years ago. So let's put this all together. A sea that refuses to sustain life, hiding microbial colonies that thrive on fire itself, sinkholes vomiting out ruins, sulfur and charred remains. A city obliterated in an instant, its walls melted like wax, scrolls that describe fire from the heavens and destruction without warning, geometric patterns beneath the water, too precise to be natural, a possible crater buried under salt, a silent scar of cosmic violence. All these threads converge on one haunting conclusion. The story of Sodom and Gomorrah may not be myth at all. It may be the most accurate, terrifying memory our ancestors ever preserved. If this is true, the implications are staggering. For religion, it would mean some of the most powerful biblical narratives are rooted in literal events. Faith traditions would be forced to confront a new kind of evidence, one that blurs the line between scripture and science. For science, it would prove that ancient people witnessed cosmic events modern humanity barely understands, that they survived impacts, encoded them in myth, and passed them on as sacred memory. For society, it would serve as a dire warning. Our planet is not immune to sudden, civilization-ending disasters. If it happened once, it can happen again. Look at the world today. Climate change, rising seas, unprecedented droughts. Add to that the silent menace of space. NASA tracks thousands of near-Earth objects, many harmless, some potentially devastating. The odds may be small, but history reminds us, it only takes one. The Dead Sea could be more than a graveyard of the past. It could be a prophecy of the future, a reminder written in fire, water, and salt. This will happen again. So, what do you think? Was the Dead Sea truly the site of divine judgment, where fire and brimstone consumed a sinful civilization? Or was it the stage of a cosmic catastrophe, an asteroid strike our ancestors interpreted as the wrath of God? And here's the chilling question. If it happened once, could it happen again, this time in our own lifetime? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed unraveling this mystery, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe for more hidden histories, and ring the notification bell so you never miss a revelation, because sometimes the past doesn't just tell us where we came from, it warns us where we're headed.